I never expected the sentence that would almost destroy my family to be whispered in my kitchen at 1:17 a.m., when the house was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator hum and my conscience scream. My brother's wife stood across from me, barefoot on cold tiles, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands shaking as if they no longer belonged to her. She had always been confident, composed, the kind of woman who knew how to command a room without raising her voice. But that night, she looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, begging not to fall alone. When she said my name, it sounded unfamiliar, like she was calling a stranger. Then she said it, slow, broken, desperate. "Just one night, please." The words didn't land like temptation at first. They landed like betrayal. Like a punch to the chest. My brother was asleep in the guest room down the hall, exhausted from another failed job interview, unaware that his life was seconds away from shattering. I wanted to yell, to walk away, to pretend I hadn't heard her. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, replaying every memory we shared as a family, birthdays, weddings, laughter at cheap restaurants, promises we thought were unbreakable. She told me she felt invisible, that my brother had been gone long before he stopped coming home on time, that loneliness can rot a person from the inside. She said she wasn't asking for love, not even forgiveness, just to feel wanted once, to remember she was still alive. Each word felt like a test I was failing in real time. I thought about loyalty, about blood, about the kind of man I believed myself to be. I thought about how some mistakes don't announce themselves as disasters until it's too late. And as the clock ticked forward, I realized the real danger wasn't desire, it was silence. Because silence was making room for something that should never exist. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A message from my brother: "Can't sleep. You up?" And in that moment, I knew whatever choice I made next would follow me for the rest of my life. If this story is pulling you in already, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next changes everything. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I stepped outside into the cold night air, hoping distance would bring clarity, but all it did was sharpen the noise in my head. The house behind me felt like a courtroom, and I was both the defendant and the judge. When I came back in, she was sitting at the table, staring at nothing, as if she'd already accepted whatever verdict I would give. I told her the truth, not the heroic kind people brag about, but the messy kind that costs you sleep. I told her that what she was asking for would not heal her, that it would only move the pain to someone else, that just one night has a way of becoming a lifetime of regret. She cried, not dramatically, not loudly, but in a way that felt heavier than shouting. She admitted she didn't know how to leave, didn't know how to stay, didn't know who she was anymore. That was when I understood something brutal: this wasn't about attraction. It was about escape. And escape always demands a price. The next morning, everything looked the same, but nothing was. My brother laughed at breakfast, unaware, trusting, calling us his two favorite people. The guilt sat in my stomach like poison. Later that day, she told him the truth, not about the night, but about the emptiness, the distance, the quiet ways their marriage had been dying. It led to weeks of arguments, therapy sessions, tears, and uncomfortable honesty. Some days they almost broke. Other days they almost healed. As for me, I learned that doing the right thing doesn't make you feel proud, it just lets you live with yourself. Months later, my brother thanked me without knowing why. He said, "You're the only reason I still believe in family." And I realized that some temptations come into your life not to be taken, but to reveal who you really are. This story isn't about desire, it's about restraint. Not about betrayal, but about the thin line between weakness and character. And if you've ever stood at that line, you know how loud the silence can be. The days after that night felt unreal, like I was moving through a life that no longer belonged to me. Every sound in the house seemed louder, every glance heavier. My brother laughed more than usual, which somehow made it worse. He joked about small things, teased his wife the way he always had, completely unaware that something fundamental had shifted beneath his feet. I watched her closely, not with longing, but with worry. She had gone quiet, too careful with her words, like someone afraid a single sentence might crack the floor beneath her. One evening, she asked me if I hated her. The question caught me off guard. I told her no, because hate would have been easier. Hate would have let me stop caring. What I felt instead was a deep, uncomfortable responsibility. She confessed that she had started writing letters she never intended to send, letters to herself, to her younger self, to the woman she thought she would become. She said marriage hadn't broken her, but loneliness had. I told her loneliness doesn't give us permission to destroy other people's lives. That was the first time she didn't cry. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew. That night, I realized the danger hadn't passed. It had only changed shape. Temptation was no longer loud, it was quiet, patient, waiting for fatigue to win. And that scared me more than anything. The truth came out the way most truths do, not in a dramatic explosion, but in fragments. My brother noticed the distance first. He asked why she no longer reached for his hand, why conversations felt like negotiations instead of comfort. Therapy was her idea. Honesty was the therapist's demand. Sitting across from them during one session, invited only because family matters, I watched my brother's face change as he heard things he had never allowed himself to notice. He wasn't cruel, just absent. He had assumed stability meant success, that providing was the same as being present. When she spoke about feeling unseen, his eyes filled with a kind of shame no apology can erase. And then came the moment I feared most, the look he gave me when he realized I already knew how broken things were. He didn't accuse me. That hurt more. Trust like that is a weight you don't want to drop. That night, he told me he was afraid of losing her. I wanted to tell him how close he already came, but some truths are not meant to be spoken, only carried. If this story means something to you so far, this is your reminder to subscribe, because the hardest chapters are still ahead. Time passed, but it didn't heal evenly. Some days were hopeful. Others felt like rehearsals for goodbye. She began spending weekends away, saying she needed space to remember who she was outside of being someone's wife. My brother worked harder at being present, but effort can't erase years of emotional distance overnight. As for me, I started pulling away, not out of guilt alone, but out of survival. I needed boundaries, silence, distance. One evening, she came to say goodbye before leaving for what she called a break. She thanked me, not for that night, but for refusing it. She said my refusal forced her to face herself instead of hiding behind impulse. That was the moment I understood something important. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for someone is disappoint them. When she left, the house felt hollow. My brother didn't cry. He just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, as if willing it to open again. I stayed with him that night, not saying much. Loyalty isn't loud. It shows up and stays. 6 months later, life looked different, but not broken. She came back changed, calmer, clearer. Not fixed, just honest. They didn't rush into pretending everything was okay. They rebuilt slowly, painfully, with conversations that lasted past midnight and truths that bruised before they healed. I eventually moved out, needing my own space, my own distance from a chapter one never wanted written. On my brother's birthday, he hugged me longer than usual and said, "I don't know what you protected me from, but thank you." I never told him. Some confessions are selfish. What matters is what survived. Today, when I think back to that night, I don't feel pride. I feel relief. Relief that I didn't trade a lifetime of trust for a moment of weakness. This story isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing the kind of pain you can live with. And if you're listening to this and standing at your own crossroads, remember, character isn't proven when it's easy, but when it costs you something. If this story made you pause, reflect, or question yourself, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the stories that stay with us are the ones that tell the truth. I thought distance would erase the memory, but distance only sharpened it. Living on my own gave me space, yet my mind kept returning to that night, not with temptation, but with questions. What if I had answered differently? What if weakness had spoken before values did? Those questions don't fade, they mature. My brother and his wife invited me over more often, trying to rebuild not just their marriage but the idea of family itself. I could see the effort in the small things, shared jokes, planned dinners, honest silences that didn't feel hostile anymore. But there was also fragility, like a glass repaired so carefully that everyone was afraid to touch it too hard. One evening, my brother admitted something he had never said out loud. He had always lived in fear of failing as a husband, so he distracted himself by being busy instead of being present. Hearing that cracked something open in me. I realized how easy it is to judge from the outside, how invisible struggles can be even to the people closest to us. His wife listened quietly, not interrupting, not defending herself, just listening. That was new. That was growth. Watching them, I understood that betrayal doesn't always start with desire, sometimes it starts with neglect. And healing doesn't arrive dramatically, it sneaks in through consistency, accountability, and humility. If this story feels uncomfortably real, that's because it is. And if you're still listening, don't forget to subscribe, because the final chapter brings the meaning home. A year passed. Life moved forward the way it always does, unevenly, imperfectly, but persistently. My brother and his wife weren't the same couple they used to be, and that turned out to be a good thing. They were more honest, less performative, no longer pretending love meant never struggling. As for me, I carried the lesson quietly. I learned that integrity isn't about resisting strangers, it's about protecting the people who trust you when they're not watching. That night in the kitchen became a turning point, not because of what almost happened, but because of what didn't. Some stories don't end with a confession or a scandal. They end with restraint, with silence, with choices that never make headlines but define lives. When people ask me what loyalty means, I don't give speeches anymore. I just think of that moment, that sentence, that pause before everything could have gone wrong. And I'm grateful. Grateful that I chose the kind of pain that fades, instead of the kind that follows you forever. If this story made you reflect on your own choices, your own boundaries, your own quiet battles, then stay with us. Subscribe to the channel, because the stories worth telling aren't always about what we did, but about what we refuse to do.